Victoria Chen had learned to recognize the weight of a parent's worry from across a crowded room. It was something in the shoulders, the way they curved forward just slightly, carrying invisible burdens that never quite settled. She saw it now in the man sitting 3 tables away. His daughter's small hand wrapped around a crayon, her tongue poking out in concentration as she colored the back of a paper placemat. Marcus tugged at her sleeve. "Mom, look at that little girl. She's drawing a Christmas tree." Victoria followed her son's gaze. The girl couldn't have been more than 7, wearing a navy blue dress that had clearly been loved for several years. The hem had been let down. She could see the faint line where new fabric had been added. The father wore a suit jacket that hung loose on his frame, the cuffs slightly frayed. He was studying the menu with an intensity that Victoria recognized immediately. She'd worn that same expression 15 years ago, when every dollar had a specific purpose and spontaneity was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Can I wave to her?" Marcus asked, his 8-year-old enthusiasm barely contained. "Of course, sweetheart." Marcus raised his hand in a small wave. The girl looked up, startled, then broke into a shy smile and waved back. Her father glanced over, offering a polite nod to Victoria before turning his attention back to the menu. There was something careful in his movements, something measured. Victoria watched as he caught the waitress's attention. "Just water for me, please," she heard him say quietly. And could she have the chicken tenders from the children's menu, with the fruit instead of fries? The waitress smiled kindly. "And for you, sir, just the water is fine, thank you." Victoria's chest tightened. The chicken tenders were the cheapest item in the children's section. She 500 ordered from enough menus like that to know. The fruit substitution meant he was thinking about nutrition over his daughter's preference, making the healthy choice even when the fries came standard, and nothing for himself. Her mind did the math automatically. He was probably planning to eat something at home, something cheap that he'd already purchased, saving the restaurant money for his daughter's meal. Marcus had returned to his own hot chocolate, decorated with an elaborate mountain of whipped cream and mini marshmallows. He took a sip, leaving a white mustache on his upper lip, and Victoria couldn't help but smile. But her eyes kept drifting back to that corner table, to the little girl who'd resumed her coloring, to the father who sat with his hands folded on the table, watching his daughter with a mixture of love and something that looked like grief. "Mom?" Marcus had followed her gaze again. "The little girl doesn't have hot chocolate. Do you think she wants some?" "I think maybe so, baby. Can we—" Victoria was already considering it. A simple gesture. Pay for their meal, maybe send over dessert. The restaurant knew her well enough. She could do it anonymously. Let them have a nice evening without the weight of charity. She was reaching for her phone to text the manager when she saw the father stand abruptly, murmuring something to his daughter before walking quickly toward the hallway where the restrooms were located. Something in his movement made Victoria pause. She watched the little girl continue coloring, completely absorbed in her art, and then Victoria made a decision. She stood, touching Marcus's shoulder. "I'll be right back, sweetheart. Stay here." "Okay, Mom." Victoria moved through the restaurant with purpose, following the path the father had taken. The hallway was quieter, away from the gentle din of Christmas Eve diners. She could hear his voice before she saw him, standing near the men's room with his phone pressed to his ear, his free hand pressed against the wall as if he needed it for support. "I understand," he was saying, his voice strained. "I can make a partial payment tomorrow. 500. I'll have the rest after my next paycheck, I promise." A pause. January 15th. Victoria stopped, suddenly feeling like an intruder, but something kept her there, listening. She doesn't know yet how sick she really is. His voice cracked on the last word. "I'm trying to give her one normal Christmas before the treatments start, before everything changes." Another pause, longer this time. "I know I'm behind, I'm working on it. She's 7 years old. She shouldn't have to spend Christmas worrying about hospital bills." Victoria's hand went to her chest, pressing against the ache that had opened there. She turned away quickly, walking back toward the dining room before he could see her, before he could know that someone had overheard his private moment of desperation. But the weight of what she'd heard followed her like a shadow. When she reached their table, Marcus looked up hopefully. "Is everything okay?" "Yes, baby, everything's fine." But it wasn't fine. That little girl, coloring her Christmas tree with such innocent focus, was sick. Sick enough to require treatments. Sick enough that medical bills were drowning her father. Sick enough that he was skipping meals to make partial payments to hospitals. And he was trying to give her one normal evening, one moment of childhood magic before reality crashed back in. Victoria looked at Marcus, at his hot chocolate and his own barely touched appetizer of calamari, at the ease and comfort of his life that she'd fought so hard to give him. She remembered the year he was 2, when her card had been declined at the grocery store, when she'd had to put back the diapers and the formula, when an elderly woman behind her in line had quietly paid for everything and pressed $200 into her hand. "Pay it forward when you can," the woman had said. "That's all I ask." Victoria had built an empire on the foundation of that kindness. Chen Technologies was worth billions now, and she'd established the family foundation years ago, helping families drowning in medical debt in circumstances beyond their control. But this was different. This was happening right in front of her, on Christmas Eve, and she had the power to do something about it right now. Marcus was waving at the little girl again. This time, the girl waved back more enthusiastically, holding up her drawing to show him. It was a Christmas tree decorated with ornaments, a star on top, presents underneath. The kind of drawing that showed hope, that showed a child who still believed in magic. "Mom," Marcus said softly, "can we sit with them?" Victoria looked at her son, at his open, empathetic face, and something clicked into place. This wasn't about writing a check. This wasn't about anonymous charity. This was about connection, about seeing people, about showing up. She took a breath. "You know what? I think that's a wonderful idea." Before she could second-guess herself, Victoria stood and walked across the restaurant. The father had returned to his table, was saying something to his daughter that made her giggle. They both looked up as Victoria approached, and she saw the immediate flash of concern in his eyes, the look of a man who'd learned to expect bad news. "Hi," Victoria said, keeping her voice warm and gentle. "I'm so sorry to interrupt. I'm Victoria, and that's my son Marcus over there." She gestured toward her table where Marcus was watching hopefully. "You noticed that you have a fellow artist here, and we were wondering if you might like to join us. It's Christmas Eve, and it seems too special a night to spend at separate tables." The father's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, surprise, suspicion, and something that might have been hope before caution shut it down. "Oh, that's very kind, but we wouldn't want to intrude." "You wouldn't be intruding at all," Victoria said quickly. She knelt down slightly to be at eye level with the little girl. "I saw your beautiful drawing. Is that your Christmas tree?" The girl nodded shyly, then held up the placemat. "It's for my daddy, so he can remember this Christmas." The simple statement nearly broke Victoria's heart. She glanced up at the father and saw him swallow hard, saw the emotion he was trying to contain. "It's beautiful," Victoria said softly. "The first bet, he'll treasure it forever." "Sophie loves to draw," the father said, his voice slightly rough. He cleared his throat. "I'm David Morrison. It's lovely to meet you both." Victoria stood, meeting David's eyes. She could see the pride warring with something else, maybe loneliness, maybe the weight of carrying everything alone. "Please join us. Marcus has been talking about how he wants to show Sophie his drawings too. He has a whole folder of them on my phone." Sophie's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Really," Victoria confirmed. She looked at David again, and this time she let him see something real in her expression. Not pity, but understanding. Recognition. "Please." David looked at his daughter, at her excitement, and Victoria watched the moment he decided that his pride was less important than Sophie's happiness. "Okay," he said quietly. "Thank you. That's very kind." As they gathered their things, Sophie carefully rolling up her drawing, David helping her with her coat. Victoria caught the eye of their waitress and subtly gestured that they'd be combining tables. The restaurant staff, used to accommodating her requests, quickly pushed 2 tables together near the window, where the Christmas lights from the street cast a warm glow. Marcus was practically bouncing with excitement as Sophie and David approached. "Hi, I'm Marcus. I'm 8. How old are you?" "I'm Sophie. I'm 7. She held up her drawing. "Do you like to draw too?" "I love drawing. Mom, can I show her the pictures?" Victoria pulled out her phone, scrolling to the album where she kept Marcus's digital artwork. As the children immediately huddled together, their heads bent over the phone screen, Victoria and David sat across from each other. The silence between them was initially awkward, filled with the weight of the situation. A wealthy woman and a struggling father, brought together by chance and the pure hearts of their children. "Thank you for this," David said finally. "Sophie doesn't get out much. This means a lot to her." "It means a lot to Marcus too," Victoria said honestly. "He's an only child. He loves making new friends." The waitress appeared with menus, and Victoria could see David's shoulders tense again as he reached for his. Before he could spiral back into that careful calculation, Victoria spoke up. You know what? It's Christmas Eve. Let's order family style. A few appetizers to share, everyone picks their favorite entree, and we'll share dessert. My treat to please, I insist. I couldn't, David. Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. Please, it would make me happy. It would make Marcus happy. And I think it would make Sophie happy too. He looked at his daughter, who was laughing at something on Marcus's phone screen, and Victoria watched him surrender. Okay, thank you. Really, thank you. As they ordered, Victoria quietly upgrading items, adding a hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Sophie without making a production of it, she began to ask gentle questions. Where did they live? What did David do for work? Nothing invasive, nothing that felt like an interrogation. Just two parents, sharing a meal, getting to know each other. David's story emerged in pieces. He'd been a mechanical engineer before his wife died 3 years ago. Cancer, sudden and aggressive. After that, he'd taken whatever work he could find that offered flexible hours so he could be there for Sophie. Right now, he was working nights at a warehouse and doing freelance handyman work during the day. It wasn't what he'd trained for, wasn't what he'd imagined his life would be, but it let him be there when Sophie needed him. He didn't mention her illness directly, didn't volunteer the information that Victoria already knew. She didn't push. Instead, she shared her own story, carefully edited but truthful. Single mother. Marcus's father had left before he was born. Years of struggle, of working multiple jobs, of wondering how she'd keep the lights on. She didn't mention the company yet, didn't mention the billions. Just the journey, just the hard parts that she suspected David would understand. It's hard doing it alone, David said quietly, watching the children. Some days I wonder if I'm enough. If I'm giving her what she needs. Victoria looked at Sophie, at how she laughed with Marcus, at the love that radiated from every glance she gave her father. You're giving her everything, Victoria said, and meant it. Look at her. She's happy. She's loved. That's everything. David's eyes filled with tears that he quickly blinked away. I'm trying. God, I'm trying. I know, Victoria said softly. The first can see that. The appetizers arrived: calamari, bruschetta, stuffed mushrooms, and the mood lifted as everyone dug in. Sophie tried a mushroom and declared it pretty good, which made Marcus giggle. David ate like a man who hadn't realized how hungry he was, and Victoria felt the fierce protectiveness rise in her chest. This man, this father, was doing everything right with nothing but love and determination, and she had the power to help. The question was how to do it without crushing his dignity, without making this feel like charity, without making him feel small. As the main courses arrived, steak for David, despite his protests, salmon for Victoria, pasta for both children. Victoria made a decision. She excused herself, telling them she needed to make a quick call, and stepped into the quiet hallway where David had stood earlier. She pulled out her phone and dialed her assistant. Jennifer, I'm sorry to call on Christmas Eve. I need you to pull up the medical assistance applications for the foundation, and I need you to find the open positions in engineering at the company. Send me everything, tonight. When Victoria returned to the table, something had shifted in her. There was a clarity, a certainty. She'd spent 15 years building wealth, building power, building influence. But what was the point of any of it, if she couldn't use it when it mattered most? This family, sitting across from her, sharing a meal on Christmas Eve. This was what mattered, not the next acquisition, not the next billion. This, right here, right now. She sat down and caught David's eye, and in that moment something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Hope. The possibility that this strange, unexpected evening might be the beginning of something none of them could have predicted. But whatever happened next, Victoria knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was going to make sure that little girl got her Christmas miracle, and her father was going to get his too. The main courses had arrived with a flourish that made both children gasp. The presentation was something the restaurant reserved for special occasions, and Victoria had quietly requested they pull out all the stops. Sophie's pasta came arranged in a perfect nest, topped with a tomato sauce shaped like a Christmas star. Marcus's dish mirrored it, and the two children immediately started comparing their plates with delight. David had finally relaxed enough to take a real bite of his steak, and Victoria watched something like relief wash over his face. When was the last time he'd had a proper meal? When was the last time he'd let himself enjoy something without calculating the cost? This is incredible, he said, almost to himself. I don't remember the last time I had steak. My mom says you should always have good food on special nights, Marcus announced, twirling pasta onto his fork with the confidence of a child who'd eaten at nice restaurants his entire life. Christmas Eve is definitely special. Sophie nodded enthusiastically, tomato sauce on her chin. My mommy used to make special dinners too. She made the best cookies. The table went quiet for a moment. David's hand moved instinctively to cover Sophie's, and Victoria saw the flash of pain cross his face before he smiled at his daughter. She did make the best cookies. Remember the ones shaped like snowmen? With the chocolate chip buttons. Sophie's face lit up with the memory, and Victoria felt her throat tighten. This child, carrying the memory of her mother, facing an uncertain future with nothing but hope and the love of a father who was breaking himself in half, trying to be enough. Your mom sounds like she was wonderful, Victoria said softly. She was. David's voice was rough with emotion. She could make anything feel magical. Even when we had nothing, she'd find a way to make Christmas special. One year, we couldn't afford a tree, so she cut out paper ornaments and hung them from the ceiling on fishing line. Sophie thought it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. It was beautiful, Sophie said firmly. Mommy said magic isn't about money, it's about love. Victoria had to look away for a moment, blinking hard. The 7-year-old child, wearing a dress that had been carefully altered to last another year, understood something that many adults with unlimited resources never learned. She caught David's eye across the table and saw her own emotion reflected back at her. Your mommy was very smart, Victoria said, finding her voice. She was absolutely right. As they continued eating, the conversation flowed more naturally. David told stories about his engineering days, about complex problems he'd solved, about the satisfaction of designing something that worked perfectly. Victoria asked technical questions, genuinely interested, and watched him come alive talking about work he clearly loved and missed. He'd been good at it, she could tell, more than good. The way he described structural problems and elegant solutions spoke to a mind that was analytical and creative in equal measure. Why did you leave engineering? Victoria asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. David's expression sobered. After my wife died, Sophie needed me. The engineering firm I worked for wasn't flexible about hours. I couldn't be on call, couldn't work late, couldn't travel. I had a 7-year-old who just lost her mother. She needed stability. She needed me to be there. He paused, pushing food around his plate. So I found work that let me do that. It's not what I trained for, but it lets me be the parent she needs. That's not a sacrifice, Victoria said quietly. That's love. Some days it feels like both. Victoria understood that tension, the weight of choosing between the work you loved and the people you loved more. She'd been lucky. Her company had grown around Marcus, had been built during his nap times and after his bedtime, had expanded as he grew. But she remembered those early years, when every choice felt impossible, when there was never enough time or money or energy. The children had finished their meals and were back to drawing, Sophie using Marcus's colored pencils to add details to her placemat masterpiece. David watched them with a softness in his expression that made Victoria's heart ache. She'd made her decision in that hallway, but now came the hard part, executing it in a way that preserved his dignity. Sophie, Victoria said gently, what do you want to be when you grow up? Sophie didn't hesitate. A doctor. So I can help other kids who are sick, so they don't have to be scared. The words landed like stones in water, ripples of meaning spreading across the table. David's hand tightened around his fork. Marcus looked at Sophie with wide eyes. Victoria felt something crack open in her chest. That's a beautiful dream, she managed to say. Daddy says I can be anything I want if I work hard enough, Sophie continued, completely unaware of the emotional weight her words carried. He says being sick doesn't mean you can't have big dreams. Victoria looked at David and saw tears he was fighting to contain. His jaw was clenched, his eyes bright with moisture. He refused to let fall in front of his daughter. Victoria reached across the table and did something instinctive. She placed her hand over his, squeezed once, then withdrew. It was brief enough to be professional, but long enough to say, I see you, I understand, you're not alone. The waitress arrived then with dessert. An elaborate Christmas display with chocolate cake, vanilla ice cream, fresh berries, and sparklers that fountained silver light. Both children gasped in delight, their faces illuminated by the sparkles. Sophie clapped her hands together, and Marcus immediately started explaining to her how sparklers worked, his 8-year-old wisdom on full display. As the sparklers faded and the children dug into dessert, Victoria knew it was time. She'd been building toward this moment all evening, and now she had to trust that she'd read David correctly, that she could offer help without offering insult. "David," she said quietly, waiting until he looked at her, "there's something I need to tell you, about who I am." His expression shifted to concern. "Okay? My full name is Victoria Chen, the 1000th, the founder and CEO of Chen Technologies." She watched the information process across his face, confusion first, then recognition, then shock, then something that looked like mortification. Chen Technologies was one of the largest tech companies in the world. Everyone knew the name. And he'd been sitting here, sharing his struggles with a woman whose net worth was measured in billions. "Oh my God," he said quietly. I had no idea. I know. That's why I didn't mention it earlier." Victoria kept her voice calm, steady. "I wanted to meet you and Sophie as people first, not as a CEO meeting someone who might need help. Just as Victoria, sitting with David and Sophie on Christmas Eve." "Why?" The word came out raw. "Why tell me now?" "Because what I'm about to offer you is real, and I need you to know it's not some spur-of-the-moment charity. It's genuine." She pulled out her phone, pulled up a specific page, and turned it toward him. "My company has an opening for a senior mechanical engineer. The position has been open for 2 months because we can't find the right person. Someone with creativity, problem-solving skills, and the kind of dedication that shows in their work." David stared at the phone screen, at the job posting with its salary range that probably looked like a fantasy to him. "I don't understand. I've been personally involved in this hire because it's for a critical project. After talking to you tonight, hearing about your background and your approach to engineering, I think you might be exactly what we need." She paused, letting that sink in. "This isn't charity, David. This is me recognizing talent when I see it. If you're interested, I'd like you to interview for the position after the holidays." "I can't. This is too much. It comes with comprehensive medical benefits," Victoria continued, her voice gentle but firm. "Full coverage for you and any dependents, starting immediately upon hire." The color drained from David's face. He understood what she was offering. Not just a job, but a lifeline. Insurance that would cover Sophie's treatments, that would lift the crushing weight of medical debt off his shoulders. "But that's not all," Victoria said. She had to finish this, had to offer everything before he could fully process and refuse out of pride. "I started the Chen Family Foundation 8 years ago. One of our primary programs covers medical expenses for families who are struggling with healthcare costs, specifically for children who need treatment but whose families can't afford it." David was shaking his head, tears streaming down his face now, beyond his ability to control them. "No, I can't. I can't accept. Sophie's medical bills, past and future, can be covered by the foundation, all of them." Victoria's own voice was thick with emotion. "You'd need to apply, but I can have my assistant start the paperwork tonight. The program exists specifically for families like yours." "Why?" David's voice broke on the word. "Why are you doing this? You don't know us. You don't owe us anything." Victoria glanced at the children, who were still absorbed in their dessert and drawings, oblivious to the life-changing conversation happening across the table. 15 years ago, I was where you are now. Alone, struggling, trying to give my son everything on nothing. A stranger helped me. An elderly woman I'd never met paid for my groceries when my card was declined, then gave me $200 and told me to pay it forward when I could. She met David's eyes, let him see the truth of her own journey. That $200 bought formula and diapers for Marcus for a month while I got my first freelance coding jobs. It was the difference between giving up and pushing forward. I've been paying it forward ever since. But something about tonight, about seeing you and Sophie." Her voice caught. "You're doing everything right, David. You're being the father she needs. But you shouldn't have to do it alone. No one should." David put his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Victoria felt her own tears fall, not bothering to wipe them away. Across the table, Sophie looked up, noticed her father crying, and her little face crumpled with worry. "Daddy, are you sad?" David lifted his head, reaching for his daughter's hand. "No, baby, these are happy tears, the happiest tears." "Why are you happy crying?" Victoria knelt beside Sophie's chair, her expensive dress pooling on the restaurant floor. "Because your daddy doesn't have to worry so much anymore. Because you're going to get all the medicine you need. Because sometimes, on Christmas Eve, miracles really do happen. Sophie's eyes went wide. Like in the stories? Exactly like in the stories. Does that mean we can have more dinners together? Sophie looked between Victoria and her father with such hope that Victoria had to swallow hard against the emotion in her throat. Yes, Victoria said, laughing through her tears. Lots more dinners together. Marcus had been watching with the perceptive eyes of a child who understood something important was happening. He slid out of his chair and came to stand beside his mother, his small hand finding hers. Mom's really good at helping people, he announced to Sophie. She says that's what money's for, to make things better. Victoria pulled her son close, kissed the top of his head, and felt a surge of love and pride. This was what she wanted to teach him. Not that wealth made you better than anyone else, but that it gave you the responsibility to show up, to see people, to help when you could. David had composed himself enough to speak, though his voice was still rough with emotion. I don't know how to thank you. I don't even know if thank you is enough for what you're offering. Then don't thank me, Victoria said, standing and returning to her seat. Just show up. Be the excellent engineer I think you are. Keep being the incredible father I've watched tonight. That's all I ask. How does this work? Victoria pulled a business card from her purse, wrote her personal cell number on the back. Call me after Christmas. We'll arrange everything the interview, though I'll be honest, it's mostly a formality at this point. The medical paperwork. Whatever you need, my assistant will coordinate with the foundation. You won't have to navigate this alone. David took the card with trembling hands, stared at it like it was something holy. I don't understand why you're doing this. We're strangers. We were strangers, Victoria corrected gently. Now we're two parents who shared Christmas Eve dinner. Now we're Sophie and Marcus's parents, and those two are clearly best friends already. She smiled as both children giggled at something, their heads bent together over their drawings. Sometimes the people who change our lives are the ones we never expected to meet. The restaurant had grown quieter as other diners finished their meals and left. Outside the windows, snow had begun to fall, soft flakes drifting down through the glow of streetlights. It looked like a scene from a movie, like something too perfect to be real. But it was real. This moment, this connection, this choice to show up for another human being. It was all real. As they prepared to leave, bundling into coats and gathering drawings and leftover desserts in take-home boxes, Victoria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not the satisfaction of a successful business deal, not the pride of a company milestone, but something simpler and more profound. She felt like herself again. Like the woman she'd been before the billions, before the power, before she'd learned to keep the world at arm's length. She felt human. Outside, the snow was falling heavier now, coating the city in white. Sophie and Marcus immediately started trying to catch snowflakes on their tongues, their laughter bright in the cold air. David stood beside Victoria, watching their children play, and she could see the weight beginning to lift from his shoulders. Could see hope starting to replace desperation. Victoria, he said quietly, I need you to know Sophie is sick, really sick. She starts treatment in January for leukemia. That's why the medical bills. That's why I know, Victoria said gently. The first overheard you on the phone earlier. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but I heard, and I couldn't unhear it, and I couldn't do nothing. David looked at her, and in his eyes she saw gratitude mixed with something deeper. The kind of relief that comes when you've been carrying something too heavy for too long, and someone finally helps you shoulder the weight. She's going to be okay now. Because of you, she's going to be okay. She was always going to be okay, Victoria said. Because she has you. Everything else, the job, the insurance, the foundation help, that's just making it easier. But the most important thing, that's you, your love. That's what's going to get her through this. They stood there for a moment, two parents in the snow, watching their children play, and Victoria thought about the strange alchemy of the universe. How one decision to look up from your own table could change everything. How showing up for someone could save them and save you at the same time. Marcus called out, Mom, can Sophie come over sometime? I want to show her my other drawings. Yes, Victoria called back, definitely. Sophie was jumping up and down now, her thin coat dusted with snow, her face glowing with happiness. David watched her with tears in his eyes again, but these were different tears. These were the tears of a parent who could finally breathe, who could finally believe that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. As they said their goodbyes with promises to talk after Christmas, With Marcus and Sophie exchanging a solemn, pinky promise to be best friends forever, Victoria felt the rightness of it all settle into her bones. This was why she'd worked so hard, why she'd built everything she'd built. Not for the money itself, but for moments like this. For the power to look another parent in the eye and say you're not alone, for the ability to catch someone before they fell, for the privilege of being someone else's miracle. She and Marcus walked to their car through the falling snow, her son's hand warm in hers. He was quiet, processing the evening in that thoughtful way he had. "Mom?" he said finally, as she started the engine. "Yes, baby, you're the best person I know." Victoria had to close her eyes for a moment against the wave of emotion. When she opened them, she looked at her son, her beautiful, empathetic, kind-hearted son, and felt everything she'd ever worked for crystallize into this single moment of understanding between them. "I love you, Marcus. I love you too, Mom. Can we do this again? Help people like Sophie and her dad?" "Yes," Victoria said, pulling out into the snowy street. "We absolutely can." As they drove home through the Christmas Eve night, Victoria thought about the woman who'd helped her 15 years ago, wondered if she'd felt like this, full and purposeful and connected to something bigger than herself. She thought about David, probably tucking Sophie into bed right now, maybe finally able to breathe without the constant weight of impossible choices. She thought about Sophie, dreaming of becoming a doctor, of helping other kids not be scared. The city glowed with Christmas lights, each window a small universe of celebration and hope. Victoria had spent years building walls between herself and the world, protecting Marcus and herself behind layers of wealth and privacy. But tonight had reminded her of something essential, that the point of having power wasn't to isolate yourself with it, but to use it to tear down the walls between people, to build bridges, to show up. When they got home, Marcus went straight to his room to add Sophie to his drawings. Victoria stood at the window, looking out at the snow-covered city, and made a promise to herself. No matter how big the company grew, no matter how many billions accumulated, no matter how complicated her life became, she would never forget this feeling. This reminder that she wasn't just a CEO or a billionaire or a business leader. She was a human being who'd been helped when she needed it most, and who now had the power to help others. And sometimes, being someone else's Christmas miracle was the greatest gift you could give yourself. The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in white, making everything clean and new. Somewhere across the city, a little girl was sleeping peacefully, not knowing yet that her life had changed. Somewhere, her father was probably still awake, staring at a business card, hardly daring to believe. And here, in this moment, Victoria Chen stood in the window of her home and felt more wealthy than any balance sheet could measure. Because tonight, on Christmas Eve, she'd remembered what really mattered. And in remembering, she'd given herself the best gift of all. The gift of showing up, of seeing another person's pain and choosing to ease it, of using everything she'd built for something that actually mattered. Not another acquisition, not another billion, just one family, just one father and his daughter, just one moment of connection that would ripple forward in ways none of them could yet imagine. It was enough. It was everything.